You're making quite a racket, aren't you? It's been dozens. Hundreds of years. I'm not sure who started calling this place the Great Pillar. But why not treat the dead with some respect and keep it down a little?
The year 2022 has arrived, and fans of Inti Creates' flagship Azure Striker Gunvolt franchise have a lot to look forward to, especially with the long-awaited sequel Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 on the horizon this summer. Before all of that, however, Inti is kicking off the Year of Gunvolt, I'll call it, with the spin-off sequel that nobody expected would come so soon. Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger X2. Seriously, Copen has been hogging all the spotlight between Gunvolt 2 and 3, with 2 back-to-back spin-offs, DLC and Blaster Master 02, and even his pod robot partner Lola has been popping off lately, becoming a full-fledged Vocaloid in numerous music videos promoting this game, before the original muse Lumen gets a chance to. Poor girl. Is this Inti's way of preemptively apologizing for not including Copen as playable in Gunvolt 3? Well, that remains to be seen. Anyway, when Luminous Avenger X2 was announced at Bit Summit last year, at first I was really stoked for another adventure with Copen and Lola. After all, while the guy was a huge jerk prior to the X series where he mellowed out quite a bit, I was a huge fan of Copen's high-flying, high-speed gameplay that also incorporated Megaman-like special weapons into his arsenal. I would have gone as far to say that I found it more fun than Gunvolt's own gameplay. That new brake shift mode with the razor wheel? Whatever, it'll be different for sure, but it can't be that bad. I trust Inti Creates. Well, it didn't take long for all of my enthusiasm to be sucked away as Megaquint and I sat down to watch the first live gameplay of X2, the night of the announcement, and we got a taste of what the new gameplay changes really entailed. It was concerning to say the least, and as I detailed the last time I covered X2 on the channel, I made it no secret that, respectfully, I did not agree with the gameplay changes made for this sequel. No footage of the game that came out afterwards managed to change my mind either. However, I am a man of fairness, and so I decided to head into the official release with an open mind. Perhaps I was just missing something that could only click with me by playing the darn game? So, is Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger X2 the new apex of 2D action, or have my worst fears been fully realized? Let's rock and find out in our review right now. Our story begins in peaceful times following the events of X1. We catch up with the Luminous Avenger X himself, Copen, hard at work repairing and studying a rifle-shaped device he came into possession of called a blaster rifle. An advanced piece of tech that is said to clearly not be of this world and was originally meant to be attached to some kind of vehicle. Wait a minute, hold the phone folks. Does that mean the Blaster Master 02 Copen DLC is canon to the X timeline? That's wild. All that time we spent covering the BMZ series last year is finally paying off. While in the midst of his work, a mysterious wormhole suddenly appears before Copen, Lola, and Kohaku and draws them into an unfamiliar place. A desert world where only mechanical beings known as workers lived. Yes, Iris, there is a world just for Reploids. It's not a fantasy. It isn't long after arriving that the game meets a worker girl named Noel, who we're not going to mention that Inti failed the Don't Be Horny for 5 Seconds challenge with. Oopsies. Anyway, Noel tells the group that their only chance of returning home may be found at the top of a giant tower known as the Grave Pillar. And so, a few months pass while Copen converts the blaster rifle into the new razor wheel weapon, enhancing his close combat abilities and essentially making him fight more like Zero now, with some differences that we will explain soon. As if Kieran in Gunvolt 3 doesn't already meet the melee character quota. Thanks, Inafune. With Copen's new gear in tow, our heroes make their way to the Grave Pillar where the world's secrets are said to lie. Oh yeah, and there's also a Copen wannabe robot called Ypsilon that's running around. Figuring out what the heck is up with that guy's origins will be part of the fun too. The rest, I will leave for you to experience for yourself. All I can say is X2 will certainly deliver a typical Gunvolt and Inti-Creates plot, with all the twists and turns that fans have come to expect over the years. However, for the first time, I found myself not as emotionally invested in the goings-on of this plot, for the simple fact that this does take place in a separate world. Even if I do enjoy the idea of all the bosses being basically robot masters this time around. Thus, it never feels like anything that happens will have a lasting consequence on the core cast of Copen, Lola, and Kohaku once the adventure comes to an end. To use a metaphor, have you ever followed an anime show like, say, Pokemon? Then you watch the movies and you realize that the events are either not canon, nor bear any consequence on the main show? Yeah. Luminous Avenger X2's plot feels like the latter, at least to me. It's prime anime movie material. Not a bad thing necessarily, but it does take away some of the tension when you know everything will be all hunky-dory again like nothing happened by the time our heroes return to their world. To be fair to X2 though, it would be hard to top the absolute insanity that was X1. Oh boy, now that was a heck of a roller coaster. Maybe us Gunvolt fans are just spoiled at this point. Thankfully, the experience is elevated by the A+ presentation on display. The most shocking revelation is the inclusion of an English dub for the first time in Gunvolt history, outside of the one-off OVA that produced mixed results. Luckily, X2 does not suffer the same fate, as it sounded to me like a very competent dub, with a cast of talented voice actors that nailed the characterizations of every character. Bonus points for the fact that every single line of dialogue from the story to the party chats in the main menu is all voice. You can even freely swap between Kohaku and No to hear a short voice clip from them.
So, Copen, would you like to recharge with me?
Darn it, Inti. Anyway, can I just say how surreal it feels to hear Gunvolt characters speaking in freaking English and it sounding as good as it does? I recall a couple years ago, in my very first review with Inti-Creates localization producer Matt Papa after the launch of X1, we discussed the possibility of an English dub ever happening in the series because that was a thing I have been hoping to see for a while myself. And even back then, you could tell that Matt really wanted to make that feature a reality too. It's been a long time coming for sure, but it's awesome to see that dream come true today. I'm super happy for the localization team and appreciative of all the directors and actors that put in their efforts to bring what I would call a successful dub to the Gunvolt community. And hey, listen, if you really gotta be a weeb still, you can still switch between English and Japanese voices at any time through the sound settings menu. The Japanese acting is still there and just as serviceable as they have been in past Gunvolt entries, just as you remember it with the cast from X1 reprising their roles for X2. While we're talking about the settings, I also can't neglect to mention that in the control settings, the ZL and ZR triggers are supported by default. Thank mother. What isn't so cool is that while a robust volume slider is included in the sound settings, You can't actually mute any specific audio track, only make them quieter. Seriously, why include a slider if we can't mute anything? I guess they don't want us content creators recording the music or inserting our own soundtrack too easily. Now getting back onto positive things, this is the part of the review where I remind all of you lovely people at home, 40 billionth time by the way, that Inti Creates does some fine sprite work. And X2 is no exception to that rule. A highlight for me is the background environments. Each stage in the Grave Pillar takes place in different blocks in the building, each a host to totally unique environments, some you don't see often or at all in Gunvolt, such as a jungle, volcano, Arctic mountains, complete with ice physics, and even space with low gravity. Each and every environment is truly a beautiful sight to behold, chock full of small details such as the ground breaking when Copen razor wheels over it. The EX skill callout animations have gotten a heck of an upgrade too, and are perhaps the most obvious sign of the series' debut on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles. They are so detailed and graphically intensive in fact, that my puny Nintendo Switch chugs along when these animations play out. Not to a detrimental degree though. The rest of the game runs at a rock solid 60 frames per second, and load times are super short even on Switch. I did not encounter any other significant performance hiccups or crashes during my playthrough, which is always a good sign. The only weird thing presentation wise are the character mugshots during cutscenes. They are of course very nice, colorful, and detailed, but they are universally displayed in these generic standing poses, which is mostly par for the course in Gunvolt, but the poses are definitely not as dynamic even compared to X1's mugshots. That's only a minor nitpick though, it doesn't bother me that much. By the way, I don't have a ton to say about the Big 6 Robot Masters quote unquote, other than it's a colorful enough cast with some cool designs. The top 3 standouts for me were Daysight with his double arm cannon action that burns me up, Vespa with her old fashioned propellers and spear, and of course Egoraptor, Ace, because he's a ninja, I like ninjas. Also his attack patterns remind me of Shadowman EXE from Megaman Network Transmission. Yeah, people tend to forget that Egoraptor has an established voice acting career. Oh, and for any Mega Man Zero fans out there, as you are playing the game, keep an eye out for a couple of Mega Man Zero nods here and there. There's some cool little references. But hey, none of the story and presentation matters if the game doesn't play well, right? Folks, it's finally that time you've all been waiting for. Let's break down Copen and Lola's new kit in Luminous Avenger X2 and give you my verdict on the gameplay. I should start by saying, the solid, tight, and responsive control fundamentals from past Gunvolt titles that Inti Creates is famous for is still here intact. Instead, I want to focus on the drastic changes made to Copen himself. If you are coming into X2 as a veteran of Gunvolt 2 and X1 like I did, the first thing I recommend that you do is abandon what you knew about Copen's gameplay from previous titles, because things are not going to feel the same. I am of course referring to the new Break Shift mode, Copen's standard mode of play while on the ground in X2 that utilizes the Razor Wheel's power. You must embrace the chainsaw, as Copen's main attack is a 1-2-3 combo with the Razor. Then on the third strike, you can hold down the attack button to keep the saw blade spinning for as long as you wish. It is certainly powerful, with 1 or 2 combos usually being enough to rip through many smaller enemies. However, unlike other melee fighters in Inti's history, like say Zero, you can't simply get your combo in and move away easily. Understandably, the Razor Wheel is a ginormous hulking weapon, so once you commit to that combo, Copen is forced to stand still, making him vulnerable to any counterattacks or mother forbid an enemy walks into you. This does cause issues when enemies like to guard against your razor wheel until you lay off, or when up against bosses that like to stay up in the air, or rarely stand still long enough to get any serious damage in with the razor wheel, since most of your damage output is going to be in that third strike. That's why I personally found Copen's classic aerial bullet attacks and EX weapons to be a much more consistent source of damage. At least until you can get the boss patterns down enough to anticipate their movements. The razor wheel can attack in the air as well, but the weapon is relatively weak unless you are performing a ground combo. It's really a shame that the new primary weapon of the game can feel so ineffective at times. How did a freaking chainsaw, historically one of the best weapons you could find in many video games, end up feeling so weak? And that's before we even discuss Copen's air game, which really is not helping him this time around. First, I should mention that while in break shift mode, Copen can perform a ground dash that allows him to push enemies to either disrupt them or to move groups of enemies together for combos. Anytime Copen is in the air, however, he will shift to bullet shift mode. Ha, get it? Without overdrive though, bullet shift is very weak. That is because, in a decision that goes against Copen's entire original gameplay style, Inti decided to only allow for one air dash at a time. That's it. Definitely a downgrade from the 3 available bullet dashes he used to have. You can no longer chain air dashes by tagging enemies like in the past. This ends up with Copen's air game feeling quite janky, since once you commit to an air dash, you have to wait to land on the ground before performing another, no matter what. That also means if you find yourself over a bottomless pit with no way to get back up, well, good luck to you, lad. And I do mean you have to wait to fall to the ground, because for some reason they also took away the ability to double tap down to perform a landing stop. In past titles you could perform this maneuver to recover quickly, but now in X2 you simply have to deal with slowly hovering down or cancelling the hover to fall a bit quicker. Neither are ideal options though. To make matters worse, the game feels the need to remind you that your bullets are empty every single time you air dash. No, I'm not kidding. Every single time. Like, I get it, game. Copen ain't what he used to be. You don't have to constantly remind me. Sheesh. Now, if you would like to return Copen's gameplay to the way it used to be, there is still a glimmer of hope in overdrive mode, which you can only unlock by, let's see, earning 1000 kudos points, and entering the overdrive state with the power of Lola's songs. In overdrive, Copen can once again perform as many air dashes as his bullet gauge allows, and chain air dashes off of tagged enemies, just like the good old days. But wow, they really locked Copen's old gameplay behind a 1000 kudos wall? That's almost insulting, like dangling a doggy treat in front of a dog. And we're the dog. Even when you do achieve overdrive, unfortunately, even bullet shift mode doesn't feel one-to-one to how Copen played in past titles. That is because, once again, you still cannot double tap down to land even while in overdrive, forcing you to slowly fall to the ground to recover the bullet gauge. That is a strange decision that always made me feel like, something feels missing anytime I was in overdrive. And then I remembered, oh my goodness, they really left that feature out, didn't they? And let me tell ya, it feels as janky as it sounds. To sum it all up for you folks, my boy Copen got nerfed badly. Perhaps Inti finally realized how broken he was in the past and was like, alright, we need to change things up. And you know what? I respect that. Even though I thought Copen being almost too powerful was part of the fun, I think they nailed it from day one. I'm still all for new ideas and shaking things up every once in a while, but not when it feels this unfun to play. I thought, maybe I'll get it when I sat down to play this game. only to have everything I feared from watching the footage online come to rear its ugly head. I can see that they wanted Copen to have two entirely distinct styles of play, but I believe they would have been better off committing to one style or at least making some more compromises. The two immediate improvements I would suggest is allow Copen to chain extra air dashes off attacking enemies when he is not in overdrive, and bring back the double tap to land. Even just those two adjustments I feel would make things feel more natural to play. And it's not even like you could say this nerf to Copen necessarily makes this game more challenging. Maybe it does for high score runs, but I am not a speedrunner. So from a casual perspective, this game is somehow quite a bit easier to beat than X1 was. And that was due to two things. One, in addition to the standard EX skill, Colossal Maelstrom, that uses Lola's Darkness mode, that's cool. She also comes equipped with a healing mode, recovering Copen's health to full, and it can be used infinitely. So, as long as you know what you're doing, there is no reason that you should die except to pits because you missed time in air dash and couldn't find footing to recover, happened to me more than once, or other stage hazards such as the scripted escape sequences that barely give you enough time to get away. That said, unlike what Inti's advertising may suggest, it's not like healing mode comes for free necessarily. High score runners and anyone wanting to take advantage of overdrive will want to be aware that using healing cashes in your kudos points, disengaging your overdrive mode. So only use it if you really have to. Speaking of kudos, Luminous Avenger X2 operates on a difficulty that Gunvolt veterans would refer to as gutless, meaning that no matter how many times you take damage, you will never lose any kudos unless you touch a checkpoint or use one of Lola's skills to cash it in. For casuals such as myself, that does make it easier to achieve overdrive mode so you can play sort of like it's X1 again, but that may also be disappointing news for anyone looking for a challenge. One more thing, Copen no longer possesses the Pervasion ability that used to protect the user from damage. If you touch something, you're taking damage. However, there is a way to mitigate damage. Allow me to introduce you to X2's abilities menu, where you still have to grind coins in-game to purchase upgrades for Copen. And many of these are expensive enough that you're definitely not going to be buying everything in a single run. In other words, it's the X8 problem all over again. I only ever bought 2 upgrades myself on my first run. Hyper Guard, which reduces all damage to 1 as long as you stand still, and Boomerazer, that allows you to launch the Razor Wheel forward on the 3rd attack. Pretty useful since it gives you some actual range on the attack. Most of the other upgrades are straight buffs or nerfs to Copen's abilities, like increased iframes, half EX weapon cost, extended lock-on duration, increased attack power, that sort of stuff. The only upgrades that might be useful for high score runners included the ability to remove all checkpoints, and if you hate that the game is on gutless, you can buy Limit Break, which increases Razor Wheel damage while in overdrive, but taking any damage will reduce kudos to 0. That's about it. Definitely not a lot here for the high score runners. You may also want to make the game harder on yourself by toggling off HP increases from level ups, and Lola's Anthem that would occasionally revive Copen from death into a permanent overdrive state, with infinite bullet usage if he feels the bonds of his friends enough through chatting them up. In other words, the abilities menu is how you can tweak your own difficulty experience in X2. And in that way, it's pretty cool. But still, like I said, for a casual player that just wants to see the ending, it's not too difficult to complete X2 with or without upgrades. Mostly thanks to Lola's infinite healing, which ultimately feels like a band-aid for an otherwise pretty difficult game if you didn't have that. Then again, knowing is half the battle, and if you do have that knowledge, just like in X1, each of the bosses suffer from what we call Spark Mandrill Syndrome, being continuously stunned when their EX weapon weakness is used on them. Lola will even chime in to tell you that you figured out their weakness, even if you did it on accident. Well, so much for figuring things out for myself. But hey, while we're on the topic, let's break down those EX weapons, because for as much crap as I've given Copen's new gear, I still think the EX weapon lineup is neat. Copen starts the game with Anchor Nexus, an EX weapon that he obtained in X1. This replaces his old default weapon, so rest in peace, Stellar Spark. We'll miss you. Anchor Nexus works identically to X1, but it is made worse by the fact that you can only air dash once at a time, meaning less frequent attacks until you achieve overdrive. At least the weapon effectively allows you to target far off enemies, though the targeting can be pretty difficult to deal with, especially when two enemies are nearby and you want to switch targets to the other one. Doomsday Charge, obtained from Daysight, is equivalent to Mega Man 2's Atomic Fire. The more you charge it up, the larger the projectile and damage. Additionally, this can remove some stage obstacles that are hiding secret items like the returning bonus emblems. Vespa's Whirling Chopper propels Copen to new heights in the air, slicing through foes above him. This one is simple, but also simply useful, so it is a favorite of mine in the lineup. Autochrome's Optic Barrier forms a shield around Copen, and fires lasers either diagonally or vertically in all four directions. A decent defensive and crowd clearing option. Brigade's Gatling Blitz is quite literally a Gatling gun that continuously pummels the enemy for barrage or bullets. Use this if you want to lay on the pressure and quickly dispatch enemies. However, it does have a long cooldown time between uses. Channel your inner Zawodo with Hale's Cryo Flash. Similar to Mega Man Powered Up's Time Slow, it simply slows down the world around you, including enemy movements. Last but not least, word on the internet is that Megaman-esque makes Egoraptor rock hard. That's fitting because he gives the EX weapon Rolling Ripper, that is a lot like X1's Rolling Cutter, firing a series of boomerangs that circle back to you. This one is useful for taking out small foes in your path. Lastly, I should mention that you can get an alternate version of Cryo Flash by defeating the DLC boss Kohaku. No, not that Kohaku. I'm talking about Kohaku Atori from Kojin, Sword of Rewind. That coincidentally launches today as well. But I didn't get to play that one, so no review, I'm sorry. If you can figure out how to get past Kohaku's ability to rewind time, you can use Cryo Flash as many times as you want at the cost of it no longer causing damage to enemies. The Kojin DLC can be purchased digitally, but I was not able to access it during the review period. So we will follow up in the future with a stream of the boss fight when we can. Anyway, that sums up X2. It's playable, certainly, and there are good things about it, but a lot of little weird decisions with the gameplay ultimately left me feeling meh on the experience. Which sucks, because Inti Creates is one of the best action game developers in the world, as evidenced by their extensive library of fun titles. I just wish the gameplay felt more focused and refined than it actually is. Once again, I'm all for trying new things. But hey, we're Mega Man fans. We know the words "don't fix what isn't broken" practically by heart by now. And I'm feeling that X2 unfortunately may serve as a prime example of why that age-old phrase exists. Between my gripes with the gameplay and the fact that the end of the game feels rushed, having only one true fortress stage before throwing you into a series of boss rushes until you roll the credits. Man, and I said X1's ending felt short. Never mind. Yep, if I had to score this game, I'd have to settle with a 6 out of 10. X2 is a decent little game, but for the reasons explained, I couldn't help but feeling a bit meh on it. It's no surprise that I would say I preferred X1. Then again, I am coming at this from the perspective of a longtime veteran, and I cannot express this enough that this is only my opinion. And I share my opinion because I care. I want to see a Luminous Avenger X3 become a thing, and if it does, I hope it can be even better. I hope that Gunvolt 3 turns out great too, especially since it is also leaning towards melee combat. I really hope they nail that one. You're free to disagree with me on what I said about X2, of course. In fact, I would be happy to hear more opinions on this when everyone else gets a chance to play, and I would be curious to hear what a newcomer to the series might think, assuming anyone wants to choose a sequel to a spin-off as their first game anyway. That's all from me though. Congratulations to Inti Creates on the launch and to the localization team for finally getting a good English dub into a Gunvolt game. Man, I still cannot believe that happened. For more on Astro Striker Gunvolt, including streams of Luminous Avenger X2 and feature coverage on Gunvolt 3, stay tuned to ShadowRockZX. Stick around for our Megaman content too if you like. I hope your day or night reaches a new apex in a positive way, and until next time we meet, rock on!